Hello and welcome. I'm Carolyn Grimminger with the Public Affairs Forum of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin. Our program's mission is to nourish the mind and spirit and serve social justice. Our forums occur on most Sundays at noon and are free and open to the public. We encourage you to attend. For more information about our Public Affairs Forum, you can go to our church website at www.austinuu.org. For Allan Graham, it's all about his relationships with God, his family, staff members, and certainly the homeless men and women he regularly engages on the streets of our community. Allan is the founder and CEO of Mobile Loaves Fishes. MLF is a social outreach ministry committed to providing permanent, sustainable solutions for the chronically homeless while surrounding them with compassion, love, and dignity. Those who know Allan best know that he is a man on a mission to relieve the struggles homeless individuals face in obtaining their basic needs of food, community, and a place to call home. Since its founding in 1998, Mobile Loaves Fishes volunteers have served more than 5 million meals with a side of hope to homeless men and women living on the streets of Austin. The organization has also spawned similar food truck ministries in other cities across the United States. With the support of more than 19,000 volunteers, Mobile Loaves Fishes is the largest prepared feeding program to the homeless and working poor in Austin. Graham is also the visionary behind MLF's Community First Village, a 27-acre master plan development that provides affordable, permanent housing and a supportive community to the chronically homeless in Central Texas. While many Mobile Loaves Fishes volunteers describe their experience as life-changing, the organization's mission to serve the homeless has perhaps changed no one more than Allan Graham himself. Previously a real estate developer and investor, Allan founded Trilogy Development and the Links Group, which developed Austin's airport cargo facility and similar facilities at airports around the country. Allan and his wife, Tricia, were married in September 1984 and have raised 4 children of their own and a niece that they raised as well. Allan is a published author of the book, Welcome Home, One Man's Journey of Discovering the Meaning of Home. This time I'd like to start a video and then Allan will proceed with his talk.
It was a simple idea that started an extraordinary movement. When we first started our food truck ministry 20 years ago, we didn't have a perfect plan in place. In fact, we knew very little about the root causes of homelessness. What we did know is that God called us to feed our homeless neighbors living on the streets. So that's what we did. We quickly learned that homelessness is a result of a profound, catastrophic loss of family. Truly, helping our friends would require more than just food. We had to create a new kind of community, one built for the despised, the outcast, the hopeless, and the abandoned, a place they could call home. Community First Village was our answer. This one-of-a-kind neighborhood, a 51-acre development, is changing the model for how we engage our homeless neighbors and feed the relational emptiness they've experienced for so long. We help lift them up off the streets, out of the camps and alleyways, and provide a path toward healing. What has been simply amazing is how so many people have rallied around this movement. People from all walks of life have poured in their time, talent, and treasure to make the Community First vision a reality. And what we've built together is truly extraordinary. This is a place where lives are being transformed every day, a place where our friends are empowered to cultivate with purpose, where they can use their gifts and talents to earn a dignified income. It's a place where they are loved, where they are known, and where they can settle. Real people who have lived through tremendous suffering are finding life all over again. Just imagine the possibilities. Imagine coming from a life lived on the streets to to a community where people recognize you as an individual of great value. No us and them, no hierarchies, just God's children making their way together. Neighbors and volunteers alike are beginning to understand what it really means to build community. Changing a culture takes time, but the culture is changing. Goodness is happening. Together, we are building hope.
That was the daily introduction out at the village by one of my great friends, John Vincent Ballard. In fact, John's picture is in your newsletter right here. John was an extraordinary human being. He spent roughly 5 decades living on the streets. In fact, he was actually kicked out of his house at the age of 8 by a stepfather for the crime of being the blackest of his 8 siblings. He was given a choice by his stepfather. I'm going to either kill you or you can leave this house. So John basically moved into the woods across the street and began a life of hustling, drug use, alcoholism, criminal activity, multiple incarcerations. I probably met John about 12 years ago as the dream of the Community First Village was beginning to grow. I met him on a street corner and I said, "Hey, brother." And at that time we were lifting people up off the streets into RVs, into privately owned RV parks. And I said, "Brother, I can get you up off the streets if you want." And he looked at me and he said, he goes, "Bro, you're full of shit." And so this dialogue between John and I continued for a number of years until finally, about 2.5 years ago, we lifted him up into the Community First Village. And it became a vital, life-giving part of our community, of our little village. What I want to talk about a little bit today are 3 points, what we call a theory of change, that if we begin to adopt these theories, I think that we're going to be able to mitigate what we see standing out on our street corners, living up underneath our bridges, in our urban camps, and in our shelters. The debacle that we see spewing out there on our streets. Number 1 is, at Mobile Loaves and Fishes, we believe very profoundly that the single greatest cause to homelessness is a profound, catastrophic loss of family. It's not addictions, it's not mental health issues, it is not affordable housing, it is not living wages. As important as those issues are, as issues of justice and issues that we must continue to battle, it is this profound breakdown culturally of the family unit in the United States of America, because everyone in this audience and everyone watching this and listening to this, inside of each one of our families is somebody that has battled addictions, mental health issues, loss of jobs, affordable housing, and somehow we collectively manage to come up underneath them and protect them. Now, it's dysfunctional beyond any measure that we can imagine. My mother was profoundly mentally ill, institutionalized multiple times over the course of her life. I had to institutionalize her myself at the age of 18 when I became her custodial caretaker. My younger brother, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective, crack cocaine addict for decades, dysfunctional inside my family. Oh man, you can't even begin to imagine, but my family came up underneath with the safety net of the family. But the men and women that you see standing on our street corner come from some of the most catastrophic, traumatic backgrounds, like my buddy John Vincent Ballard, who was kicked out of his home at 8 years old. It's hard to fathom some of that trauma that's out there. And so if we take that theory of change, profound catastrophic loss of family, and begin to understand it more deeply, most of us would agree that the original cell of social life, the cellular place where you and I are created, where we should be formed and nurtured, oftentimes there's a nuclear bomb thrown into the middle of that cellular nature. And it comes from all kinds of different places, incarcerations, single motherhood, abusive families. Unbelievable. Because when we are created, and at the moment we are created, each of us have two innate qualities. Number one, we each desire to be fully and wholly loved. Pretty simple. We want people to hold our hands, snuggle us, love us, care for us. And each of us desires to be fully and wholly known, to be valued for who we are as a human person, for people to honor us for the things that we do in life and the things that we do for others. So profound, catastrophic loss of family, number one. Number two is that we believe that housing will never solve homelessness, but community will. So built on the foundation of a profound, catastrophic loss of family, fully and wholly loved, fully and wholly known, in order to understand homelessness, we must first understand what home is. And we believe that both anthropologically and biblically, there are 8 characteristics of home. Number one, home is a place of permanence. It's not a transitory place. It's not this place where we move into this deal and then we move into that deal and we move into the next deal. In fact, if you look at the United States of America today, we are one of the most disconnected cultures ever in the history of the world. Because even inside of our own homes, we're breaking up our families by sending our children across the country, and they get married and they start having children, and maybe once or twice or 3 or 4 times a year we get to reconnect with them and see our grandchildren. But that's not anthropologically and biblically how families are supposed to interact. There's a Bedouin community outside the city of Jerusalem where that live in tents. And within this Bedouin community and the families within this Bedouin community, there are as many as 5 generations of family members. Imagine being an 8-year-old little boy or girl and sitting on your great grandmother or father's lap. It's extraordinary. But here in the United States, something very different is happening. That too ends up being a profound, catastrophic loss of family. Home is a place of permanence. Home is a dwelling place. It's that place that when we arrive and cross over the threshold, it's as if we liquefy and pour into every nook and cranny of our home. It's that place of comfort. Home is a place of embodied inhabitation. Prior to selling our home of 34 years in Westlake Hills, where Tricia and I raised 5 children. If you come in there, there were the kiln-fired handprints on the wall. There was the place where we used to measure the kids as we were growing up, and when we all got together around the holiday season, they would measure me now because I've actually shrunk, and so that they can laugh at me. And there was this embodiment of who we are. If you come to my office and you see the artwork and the things that are around, there's an embodiment of the stuff that's in there. Fourth, home is a place of hospitality. It's that place where you and I can welcome people in. You know, let's watch the Super Bowl. Let's eat some queso and nachos. Why don't you sit down and recline? Would you like something to eat? or to drink. Home is a place of safety and refuge. It's often said that the mortar that holds the bricks of even the most impoverished homes together are the stories and memories that flow out of that home. Home is a place of orientation. No matter where I've been in the world, and I've had the ability to be in some pretty awesome places around the world, my compass has always been oriented to my home in Austin, Texas. It's where I want to be the most, around my family that makes up that home. And then last and not least, home is a place of affiliation and belonging, and it just turns out that you and I like to be around people like us with shared values, shared memories. And so if you've been chronically homeless all your life, if you've smoked crack, if you've been in prison, if you've been a prostitute, when you get around other people that have a shared value system similar to that, you affiliate and belong in a much deeper way. And within these 8 characteristics of home, notice that it has nothing to do with the walls or the roof. But we think in the United States of America that if we want to solve homelessness, that we go out and build houses and then put people into these houses and that they're no longer homeless. But I will contend that we are one of the loneliest people on the planet living inside of our hermetically sealed single-family sarcophaguses that we call the American dream. With our 8-foot-tall privacy fences, swimming pools, sport courts, and barbecue pits in the backyard. We're driving around in tinted windshield SUVs with Sirius XM spewing into the car with electric garage door openers. And we get home in the evening, the garage door goes up, we pull in, garage door goes down. We end up isolated inside of our house. The kids don't go out anymore. They're not riding their bikes all over the neighborhood. They're not going to the community pool. They're not interacting with people. We're not coming outside any longer. There are no front porches. They're only big enough to get into the front door. You know, and this is the culture that we have created. And then the third theory of change, which is our vision statement for Mobile Loaves and Fishes, is the reason that we exist is that we empower communities into a lifestyle of service with the homeless. We empower communities into a lifestyle of service with the homeless. I'm going to promise you, we must cease abdicating the responsibility of fixing what we see standing on our street corners. We must cease abdicating that to City Hall, state government, and Washington, D.C. This is our collective responsibility as a community. Everybody thinks that government's got a giant pile of money to go out and do that. Money's not the answer to this thing. It's the human-to-human, heart-to-heart connection that's actually going to move the needle in this deal. It's all about community. It's all about the relationship. And so at Mobile Loaves and Fishes, what we're doing is that we're inspiring people to come onto that property and connect one-on-one with the men and women, people that have been homeless, to dive into each other's vulnerabilities. You know, what amazes me about the people that live on the streets is that they are they will begin to spew out all of their vulnerabilities. And you know what? That opens the door for us to share our trash. And when we begin to share with each other, a deeper relationship begins to be developed. And then we begin to find out that in reality, we're all on the same level. So government should play a subsidiary role to you and I. We should go out there and raise all the money. We should build the communities. We should live in the communities. We need government. I love government. They do phenomenal things. We are in partnership with our government. But if you really want to scale this to meet the demand that exists out there today, the marketplace, you and I are going to have to step into that gap. Government cannot possibly do this. The problem is so huge. And it's a human problem, not a service type problem. And there's a lot of policies that can affect that change. And one of the things that I'll talk about is, the value of work and purposefulness that within people. One of our answers to the homeless people as we roll down our windows and yell out at them is to go get a job, and if they got a job, then they can economically get themselves out of this deal. Well, let me tell you, when I moved to Austin, Texas in 1976, there were no panhandlers standing on the street corners. There were men and women selling flowers, newspapers, bottles of water, cow skulls, cow skins, and your favorite Velvet Elvis art. And but today, through occupational licensing regulations, almost every entrepreneurial activity available to people who live in poverty is either so onerous to get that license to do that, so expensive, or it's completely outlawed, so that the only remaining bastion of entrepreneurialism remaining is the First Amendment free speech right to beg. And that's what we have. Don't you find it incredible for those of you that have traveled to go to any country, anywhere in the world, in any third world country, get off the airplane, and you're assaulted by entrepreneurs selling everything, and you come to the United States of America, arguably the most abundant, resourced country ever in the history of the world, and we are now assaulted by beggars on our street corners? It doesn't resonate. And so we've got to get government to understand why this is happening on our street corners. I'm going to tell you that my friends that are on the street corners are a lot like me. They're ADD. You can't put them in a cubicle. They're not going to work at Walmart and McDonald's. And they need to be on the move. And we need to be able to create ways that more flexibly allow them to do that. I think it should be a constitutional right to go to Sam's Club right now, buy a box of blow pops, and go anywhere on public property and sell those blow pops. But that's against the law. They would do that in a New York minute if we would allow that. And it takes a village to build a village. You want to do something like what we've done out here, which has cost a tremendous amount of money, but we have resourced so many different people to come in and jump in with us to make this thing what it is today. We have 1 million collaborations. We actually call it a spontaneous order. Within the Community First Village, there's an outdoor Alamo draft house. There's a bed and breakfast. Who in a billion years would ever put into a business plan to build a community to lift the chronically homeless, the most despised outcasts, the drug addicts, the alcoholics, the prostitutes up off the streets, and that you would put a bed and breakfast in the middle of that community? It makes 0 sense on paper, but it actually makes the greatest sense on the face of the planet. It is a powerful manifestation with people coming from all over the United States to stay in our village and become a part of the life of our village. Now, what's in the way of us culturally making this change? And I'm going to tell you, at the pinnacle of the problem is one thing: not in my backyard. NIMBY, not in my backyard. It is an organized effort in every single city in the United States of America. If I could had a nickel for every time somebody patted me on the back along this journey who told me, Allan, I love what you're doing. I love your idea. This just isn't the right place for it. Not in my backyard. That's the impediment that we have in this city and every other city in making our city a more compassionate, loving place to live. And Not My Backyard is fueled by zoning, because that's the only argument, discretionary land use, that the Not My Backyard people have to discriminate against people that they do not want within some reasonable distance of where they live. Zoning would be number one on that list. We exist just outside the city limits of Austin, where there is no zoning. We share 2 property lines with the city of Austin. And so the Not My Backyard movement could not operate within the state of Texas in that fashion. And then the NIMBYs always argue 2 things. Crime, you're going to bring all of this criminal activity into my neighborhood, and it's going to be a completely unsafe place. And then the second thing that's argued is that you are going to devalue my real estate. You're going to devalue my real estate. So on the crime side of things, I can tell you in the 3.5 years that we have now had this village open, there has not been one single crime reported from one of our neighbors in one of the adjoining neighborhoods. 7 crimes from the adjoining neighborhood in our neighborhood. It's the opposite of what's happened. Property values in the neighborhood immediately contiguous to Community First Village, which, by the way, has 0 to do with our presence, have gone up in 3 years 35%. And that's because of the economy. The economy is what drives real estate values, period. The crime that we have in our community is all knucklehead behavior between human beings, just like here in this church community. You have knuckleheads that are members here, right? Any knuckleheads here, by the way? Raise your hand if you're a knucklehead. Yeah. And so we have the same human-to-human arguments and conflicts. People ask me all the time, Allan, what's it going to be like when you get 250 of these people out onto the property? And the answer is always, it's going to be a lot like your family. And then I get the big eyes and the uh-oh, that bad? And I go, yeah, that deal, yeah. And so, but other than that, look, I've lived there for 2.5 years. I think it's the most talked about neighborhood in Austin, Texas. We believe it's the most talked about neighborhood in the United States. It's the safest place I've ever lived in my life. And it's extraordinary with what we call a side salad of tension every now and then. We have people coming from all over the United States to come and check out what we're doing. And we've developed a replication model. And the first village outside of Austin opened up in Springfield, Missouri last November, December, yeah. So I want to turn back to my friend John Vincent Ballard. It actually turns out that we were not full of shit. And we did get John up off the streets, and he came home to the village and literally became a legend within the village just because of his extraordinarily, personality that was just always present in front of him. But this last August, he suffered a massive heart attack. I was there with him at that time with EMS doing chest compressions for what I thought was about a half an hour. Turns out it was about 15 minutes. They were able to revive him and load him into the ambulance and transport him to the hospital. And while there, they lost him again and were able to revive him and brought him to Seton, Maine. And he lay there for 10 days, essentially in a coma, as they were doing all the evaluations. And on the 10th day, August 17th, they called us and said, this was it. And John lay in his bed. He was surrounded by this extraordinarily beautiful, dark African-American male. Was laying in bed, dying, surrounded by 8 white women, an Asian woman, and a Hispanic woman, holding his hands, praying over him, laughing, joking, recalling stories. Aretha Franklin was blaring in the background. She had just passed away. And they ceased the medical intervention. And within moments, he passed away. He passed away with the dignity that every one of us deserves to have as we're transitioning from this life to the next life. The transition of being surrounded by family, letting us know how much we are known and how much we are loved. Within a few days after his death, we received a letter from the palliative care charge person at Seton that basically said, I'd never seen anything like this. It was a miracle. What we witnessed, the entire staff at Seton that was on that ICU floor, was incredible. It was moving. It was full of love. It was full of what each of us would want as we're making that transition from this life to the next life. And in the end, after suffering so much trauma over his life, being kicked out of his house, the drugs, the alcohol, the incarceration, the abuse of just living on the street, John was now finally and fully healed. With every good morning, John offered us all a brand new chance to heal. Every good morning, we could feel that healing. And every day, all of us are offered an opportunity to serve goodness. And so we invite each of you into a lifestyle of service with the most broken, battered, lost, and forgotten. I'm going to promise you, you will never be the same. Thank you all very much.
I know you're quite a philosopher, but I'd like to ask a couple of pragmatic questions. One is, how do you respond to people who say, oh, most of the homeless people would prefer to be where they are than to be helped? And then second, what do you do about health care?
Yeah, 2 great questions. What I try to do for your first question is take people back to when we were 12 years old. And imagine the 12-year-old little boy, little girl that we all are, laying in bed at night in that little twilight place where we're dreaming and fantasizing about the future as we're about to go off to sleep. And the windows are open and we're looking out into the starry, starry night. And the dreams of what we are going to be when we grow up are kind of swirling around in our heads. I can tell you that I had 3 dreams, 3 fantasies. Number 1, I thought I would be a rock star. I played guitar. I had a band at that time. And I can tell you that today, at 63 years old, when I'm riding around in that truck and I've got my loud classic rock blaring through the radio, if one of those songs that has always penetrated me comes on, I am now transported onto the stage with a guitar in my hands, singing that song and playing that guitar. Yet, I know today that will never happen. Yet, the dream is still in my head. Second thing I wanted to be was a football player in the NFL. I played football through high school. There were a lot of times when I was pretty awesome. I learned as a senior in high school that I wasn't actually that good. And I can still watch a football game today and see some play unfold that involved a position that I played. And I see myself on that football field doing that play. But I can tell you that at 63 years old, that will never happen. And then the third dream that I had is I wanted to be a jet fighter pilot. I ultimately became a private pilot, but I wanted to be a jet fighter pilot. And to this day, man, if I hear the sound of one of those fighter jets screaming through the sky, I look up and I visualize myself inside of that cockpit. But I know that Uncle Sam is never going to put me in the controls of a $100 million airplane. It's just not going to happen. Yet, these are the embers of dreaming that propelled all of us into the place that we ultimately became. This is that burning desire of wanting to be something and to be somebody, to be fully and wholly loved and to be fully and wholly known. And I'm going to promise you, never, ever, 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 in the history of all mankind, did a little 12-year-old boy or girl lay in bed at night looking out at the starry, starry nights and dream about being homeless, crack addict, and a prostitute. That dream does not exist, and there is nobody on the face of the planet that would ever choose that. Now, what you see is resignation disguised as a choice. Because we resign ourselves to being who we are in life most often. It's not that we necessarily chose that, but we have resigned. There's no, now they'll tell you, no, I choose this. That's BS. Nobody would want that. It's not possible. And so it's just simply resignation. And then it's resignation that is built on top of lots of disappointment and rejection along the way. First, from the profound catastrophic loss of family. And then, look, I don't want to blame the system because I'm not a blamer guy. I'm a doer guy, so I don't want to blame. But we've pretended that there's this system that's out here to help people that in reality is not doing much to help people. So there's this built-in disappointment after disappointment after disappointment to the point where there's no belief. Like John Vincent Ballard would say to me, you're full of, so resignation. Never a choice. I've never met anybody ever in my 20-something years of doing this that, really would choose that deal. And that's their side of the deal. On our side of the deal, we use that term choice because if in fact they have made that choice, then we don't have to jack with that deal. And so we say, and we will blame them as making that choice so that we can abdicate our responsibility and walk away from that. Now look, the healthcare system for people that live in poverty is it's a train wreck, and it's complex. We have on site a medical facility, a 2,500 square foot medical facility that is run by Integral Care, who has 10 full-time employees on site doing nothing but behavioral health care. And then 3 half days a week, we have Community Care come out with their mobile health care team to do primary health care. We have designed completely, where construction documents are done, we're out for bid, and we're about to go into a $5 million capital campaign to build a 20,000 square foot clinic that would be 13,000 roughly dedicated to primary and behavioral health, and a 7,500 square foot hospice respite care 16-bed facility. This is going to be a game changer in our community. The problem currently is, any of us that, battle any kind of health needs, and, I've got a great healthcare plan. You still have to beat up on the insurance company to make sure that you're getting all the right stuff that you need. And, you got to demand the MRIs when they may refuse the MRIs and that kind of thing. And I'm able to jump in my car and go to an urgent care clinic and get treatment for the flu or, and that kind of stuff almost on an instantaneous basis. It's not that way for people who live in poverty, because not everybody takes Medicare, Medicaid, MAP, or the Affordable Care Act insurance. In order to get to the doctor, you're going to have to jump on a bus. That bus ride could easily be an hour and a half to 2 hours. And if you're going to the typical clinics that support people that live in poverty, and there's some great ones here in town, those waits inside those clinics can be hour and a half, 2.5 hour long clinics. And then on top of that, a 3-hour bus ride to and from. And at some point in time, people just get exhausted with that. We have a full-time healthcare navigator whose only job is to connect people to all the right resources, and then to demand the right treatment for people. We have everybody signed end-of-life documents. Not about 60% of our population have signed end-of-life documents, medical directives, medical power of attorneys, DNRs, body dispositions, and all these things, so that when something happens, because it's going to happen, because none of us are getting out of this deal alive, right? Yeah, we're all terminal in this thing. But when you can no longer make those decisions, who's going to make those decisions for you? And are they going to make the decisions that you want to make when you can't make those decisions? So we have these kind of conversations with them all the time. So it's complicated, man, and not an easy deal.
Another complicated issue, and that is, you mentioned the zoning impediments to developments in Austin, and so y'all are just outside of the city limits. What needs to be done to that code to facilitate the extension to provide assistance to more people? And although it wasn't approved, what was y'all's understanding of Code Next and what it might have done to y'all with all the controversy over that rejected plan?
Well, I personally spent about as close to zero amount of time trying to understand Code Next because I just thought it was, until there was really something to look at, I didn't want to dive into that deal. One of the things that I decided a long time ago is that I didn't want to be an advocate. I wanted to be a do-a-kit. And to be an advocate and say to start spending time diving into Code Next would take me away from literally lifting people up off the streets. And so I don't really know. It's complicated. There's several things that are involved in this deal. Number one is the lobbying power structure, how things work within the city of Austin, and who actually has the influential power. And there are 2 or 3, broadly groups of people that have an extraordinary amount of power, and it's complicated. There's the business community, there's the Austin Neighborhood Council and the neighborhood community, and there's the environmental community, and they all have genuine desires to make our city, or at least in their perception, a better place to live. How you bring those 3 together, what kind of leadership it would take to unify them in a lot of areas that I think we could unify people in is a very complicated task. And in my whole life of living here in Austin, Texas, 43 years, there's really only been one mayor that's been able to do that, and that was Kirk Watson. And that was didn't last a long period of time. Secondly, when you talk about affordable housing and how people live, one of the things that I would absolutely change, and one thing that I do advocate when people are talking to me about Code Next and affordable housing, is manufactured housing. You cannot build housing remotely any cheaper than you can build manufactured housing. And most people that live in poverty are living in manufactured housing, and most communities are beautiful communities. If you come to or to the Community First Village, you will see a phenomenally wonderful manufactured housing community. People living in first-class recreational vehicles and and park homes and things like that. And we have to open the door to those things. And what happens is that people will go into the gutter. It's the same thing as the NIMBY deal on crime and property values. They'll go take pictures of the worst trailer park on the planet and go, this is what my neighborhood's going to look like. But it doesn't have to be that way. You know, there can be restrictive covenants and things that are placed that demand that the owner of these communities maintain their property. There's homeowners associations all over the place that maintain neighborhoods in a relatively decent way. And so how do we allow manufactured housing? We buy manufactured housing for $70, $75 a square foot. It's an incredible value. So, but the political zoning side of that, you know, if you really look at Austin, look, there's got to be a cultural change in Austin. There's been some great articles recently about, you know, that we're really not the progressive liberal city that we claim to be. And if you're reading any of those articles, you'll begin to see how we have become phenomenally white and pretty, in an elitist way, very exclusive in order to be able to live in this town. And until we all start speaking from the mountaintop that that's the case, I mean, it doesn't change our love for Austin. This is my favorite city on the face of the planet, but it doesn't mean that we can't call it to the table for the things that we as a community, not City Hall. This isn't a City Hall problem. It's a community problem of not welcoming a diversity. We are not a diverse community. So,
following up on this unifying theme you just brought up a minute ago, how does it work at the Community First Village? I mean, how do people who have been living in the woods and living hand to mouth are now living in community with, I think you have other people living there who weren't homeless or aren't homeless to mix together. What's the daily life like? It's quite a change for people who've been living in the street. So how does that work and work well for people cohesively? And the second question is, you mentioned earlier that funding has to come from the people. Where has the funding come for your work? And how does that look for you in the future in terms of your vision growing from the site you're in now to a larger space?
We get virtually no government funding. There's some blessings in terms of fee mitigation, development fee mitigation, and stuff like that. We work closely with our city council and the county commissioners, and they've been able to provide transportation at the county commissioner level in partnership with Capital Metro, and then the city of Austin has done some fee waiver stuff for us. But really, 100% of our funding comes from private individuals, and it's strategic on our part because that's where the money is. And so what we've done over a number of years is built very strong relationships with a number of folks in Austin, Texas, that can be helpful in helping us raise the tens of millions of dollars it's going to take to continue this operation. what was your first question again? Yeah. And so it's really interesting. You know, I like to analogize coming up off the streets, because we always have this little fantasy that we're going to lift somebody up off the streets into these awesome little places, and that, bam, you're all healed now. And it's actually quite complex and takes a long time. And we believe that it takes about a month of settlement for every year that you've lived on the streets. So if you've been on the streets 40 years, 40 months is, 3 years and some change. It's actually, we have people that will move into a brand new home with brand new bedding, and we have high quality stuff, if you've seen out there, that won't even sleep on their bed for 3, 4, 5 months. They'll sleep on the floor. Sometimes you find them outside sleeping on their front porch. It takes an extraordinary amount of patience, because we're trying to accomplish a lot of things at the same time. One of the things is rebuilding trust. They don't trust us when they come into this deal. And that trust is built on decades of mistrust from family members, system things, Christians, Bible scripture slinging and telling them what they have to do. And it says right here in, James chapter deal, if you don't get this together, you're going to go to hell. And, and it's all that's just piled on year after year, decade after decade. And then they come in, and here we're going, hey, man, we love you. They don't, it doesn't, it takes a long time to earn somebody's love. So it's quite complicated. But now that we've operated this community for 3.5, nearly 4 years now, we're seeing exactly this anecdotal comment manifesting into reality, and people are really starting to settle in that have been there for a long time. And then they become witnesses to new people that are moving in. And so that's helping us, I think, accelerate the settlement process. But it is by no means an overnight deal.
So I'd like to give a little testimony, if I can. Several of us have gone out, Luther and Keith and Richard and Becky. We kind of just came out to do a little field trip, and then some of us came out again to volunteer, and we really had a transformative experience. I just really want to tell everybody that, and we're going to be organizing another trip out there. Of course, you don't have to be a member of our church to join us, but you'll be hearing more about that. So they have a really well-organized way of signing up online. There's been interest in also about an Eagle Scout, how to get your work on your Eagle Scout, if you could address that.
Well, I spent 25 years involved in the scouting movement, and both my sons are Eagle Scouts. I don't know how many Eagle Scout projects we've done out at the village, but it's been a couple of hundred, and we love them, and they're the best, and we love the process, and we love bringing the Scouts out there and dreaming about what legacy they want to leave as a result of those of their particular project. It's a great leadership learning tool for the young folks to come out there and implement this. So we just want to encourage as many of those young men as possible to come out.
Could you speak about some other volunteer opportunities?
Well, we're driven by volunteers. We probably have somewhere on average between 300 and 500 people a week that come out to the property. From the farming operation, which is a very robust farming and animal husbandry operation. We have a blacksmithing shop, a wood shop. We have a glass blowing shop, an art house, pottery studio, silk screening business. We have the car care deal where you can bring your car out and get the oil changed and state inspection and all that. We have the B&B that's out there. We have all kinds of hospitality events. We have yoga people, musician people that come out. I have a guy that comes out and records people's life stories so that they have their life story on CD or stored up into the cloud. Basically, what we say is, whatever your giftings are, whatever your desire is to do, if you like what we do, we can apply your gifts to that. We have people that go fishing and hunting and go play golf and you name it.
I think when we came out, somebody in our group was staying at your B&B, and she just talked about how nice it was.
Yeah.
And she just found it online. She was visiting from Oregon, and she just loved everything about it.
Yeah.
You're also expanding, right? We have a couple minutes left. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. No. So we the original phase one's on 27 acres, and we have about 225, 230 homes there, almost fully occupied. We're under construction on 24 acres next door. That's where the clinic and a community works building, and we'll add another 310 homes there over the next three years or so. That infrastructure will be finished by sometime around September, weather permitting right now.
Regarding immigration, you made a comment about the crime situation out there, where the crime actually occurs and who it actually affects. And it's the reverse of what a lot of people assume. The immigration issue, I'm wondering if you could comment on how that might at all tie into what you're doing.
Well, if I drive around Austin and look at every construction project that's going on in this town, whether it's home building, tower building, or infrastructure building out at the Community First Village, you would be hard-pressed to find anybody that did not come from a Latin American country. So from an intellectual point of view, I don't know how, we can't survive as an economy without our neighbors from the South being I think I almost look at it as a non-issue that just gets us flamed up when we want to be flamed up. So.
Okay, thank you so much. We're about out of time.
Yeah.